Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our show. Tonight, Mike and I have the great pleasure to have my friends and colleagues Stephen Major, Larry Beans Baxter, and Josiah Martin on the show, and we're going to talk about Port Chatham. We're going to go through the history of it, the difficulties of being there, and, what it costs, and the logistics behind mounting such an expedition. So welcome, gentlemen, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Adam.
Stephen, my pleasure. Stephen, I'm going to start with you first, if I may. So, Stephen, you obviously financed and led the expedition, and this was something of a passion of yours for a long time. Why the hairy man of Port Chatham? What is it specifically that interests you?
Well, there's actually, Adam, there's two things that interest me in that. One of them was the history of the place itself, and that being the hairy man and the legend and the history of him has as being a more of a predator type Sasquatch that goes after people, pursues them, has attacked them, and things like that. And that appealed to me in a great degree because I have to back up a little bit. Prior to this, I had been running a number of expeditions up on Vancouver Island in search of definitive proof of the Bigfoot there, and we always were the pursuer. We always had to go out and chase him and run around. He was very elusive and things like that, and that was getting to be a little bit tiring. And then a gentleman reached out to me and said, "Hey, have you ever looked at the history of Port Chatham and the hairy man?" And he clued me in a little history on that. I did some research, and I thought, wait a minute, this is the place to go. Not only the history of the place and the fact that no one had been there before, but here we have a beast that actively pursues people that come into the area rather than us having to pursue him. And I thought that would offer us a better opportunity to obtain definitive proof of the existence of Bigfoot than running around on Vancouver Island.
Very good. Now, I remember that when you and I first spoke about it on Vancouver Island, you were very passionate about it. And one of the things that really struck me, because you were talking to me about the idea of us going in the first place, was the fact that it was, I remember you saying, well, it's an aggressive potential Bigfoot creature. Why does that particularly appeal to you? I just want you to sort of enunciate a little bit more, expand on that, please.
Well, the fact that it's such an aggressive creature, in my mind, I thought, well, this is going to give us a great opportunity because, with me and you and other researchers who go out and we investigate and we're looking for definitive proof, it seems like we're always the one who's a pursuer. We have to go to great lengths and we spend all this time chasing an elusive beast. And I thought, well, this Port Chatham hairy man, there's ample records and reports of him chasing people out of the area, actually, doing harm to other people. I just thought that this would be the best opportunity for us to have the type of encounter that we want because we wouldn't have to go to such great lengths in pursuit of him, that we could go into this area where no one has ever been, no other Bigfoot researchers have ever gone before. We could set up and that he would come to us, he would come to us, which would make our task in getting proof of his existence that much easier.
And there were two things, I think, as well, to add to what you're saying. First of all, the notion that any creature as an entire species is completely benevolent and good is a nonsense, would you say, Stephen, or am I putting words in your mouth?
Absolutely.
And the second thing is, go on, carry on, forgive me.
Well, especially when you look at the history of Port Chatham, there was no good stories. There's no happy stories about encounters with this beast. None whatsoever. When you look at the history in the Pacific Northwest, or you look at the history of Vancouver Island in that area with Sasquatch, people will have these encounters and they'll say, oh, I saw him and he scared me and this or that, or every now and then he'll tip over a mobile home. But there has been absolutely no positive reports of benevolent encounters with this beast. And that intrigued me greatly. He is definitely something that...
forgive me 1 second, Stephen. If it's an aggressive creature, or aggressive creatures, obviously not the same one as was around 70 years ago, that makes it easier to track, would you say, or not?
Oh, absolutely so. Absolutely so. And the likelihood of having an encounter is much more likely. And, when you look at the history of the Nantinaq, the hairy man, the Nantinaq, as he's known among the natives up there, he's in a totally different environment than say, your Sasquatch of the BC coast or in the Pacific Northwest. He looks different. He acts different. He's very aggressive because he's also a predator. To survive in the environment that he's in, he has to be predatory by nature because he doesn't have the ample food sources and things like that. So, the whole idea of it just intrigued me greatly.
Good stuff. I'm going to come on to, I'm going to discuss the history of it a little bit with Beans in a few minutes. And of course, it'd be excellent if you joined in that discussion. One of the things that I wanted to get across when I spoke to you initially, because people don't realize this, and I'm not going to ask you to give me exact numbers or anything else like this, but people think that you can just turn up there. This place is only accessible by boat, and you financed this yourself. What sort of quantification of numbers would you be prepared to say this sort of thing costed?
Well, I can put it into a daily figure. And because of the difficulty in getting out there, and you've got the difficulty of people even wanting to take you out there. As you remember back in June, that was very difficult.
Yeah.
You can't fly in there. You got to go by boat. And everything in Alaska is very expensive. But I can put a number on it. It costs roughly $3,500 to $4,000 a day just to be there.
Just to be there. And so to be very, very clear, just so people know, you and I and Josiah went the first time, which is about a year ago in June, and then you and Beans and Josiah went again with Larry Beans Baxter in September, and then obviously all of us have come again very recently, making this documentary with the guys from DreamWorks Films. So you've been on 3 occasions, and the rest of us have been on 2 occasions, and each time it's about $3,500 a day. Is that what you're saying? Well,
that's just to be there. That's just to be in Port Chatham. Putting together an expedition of this scale, because of the logistics involved, the equipment you have to have, and whatnot, you're looking at about $28,000 just to be able to put the deal together.
And is that per expedition that you went on? So the first one that we went on, the second one,
yes.
The third one, is that per one? Or is that a holistic number? So that's per expedition.
Correct.
So that's a heck of a lot of money. So how badly did you want to go, Stephen?
Believe me, very badly. Very badly. This was an exciting opportunity. No one had done it before. And to get out there and go into this place, I was willing to spend the dough, and I was making that type of commitment. If nothing else, my enthusiasm to get out there, but my financial commitment shows just how determined we were.
So what I want you to do is, bearing in mind, I wanted people to understand your motivation and your passion about it, because it's not always something that people get across. So we're in the boat, and we land the first time. You, Josiah, and I land the first time in Port Chatham, and you see the buildings for the first time. How did you feel, Stephen?
Oh my God, it was a surreal experience. It really, really was. After spending, you have to keep in mind, the first trip out there was a year. It was a year from the date that I got the information about the place, and then planning the trip and to get out there. And I'd done so much research. I'd read everything I could ever find about Port Chatham, Alaska. I had talked to people about it and all that. I envisioned it, and there were very few photos available of it, so I didn't know exactly what we were going to find when we would get there. But I'll tell you, when the experience of actually pulling into Port Chatham and getting off that boat for the first time and walking through that eerie town site, to me was the equivalent of Apollo 11. I mean, landing on the moon. It was just an amazing feeling to actually be there.
And I remember that moment. I remember looking at your face, and you felt, I think, one of the emotions I saw you feel, and I don't know whether Josiah feels the same way, I'll ask him later, but you felt like, almost like you were vindicated, that you'd done something that was unique, and you'd fulfilled that ambition when we were there. Is that fair enough to say?
Oh, very, very, very much so. Very much so in that degree, because I'm a very determined individual when it comes to, accomplishing things. In particularly, I want to do things that other people haven't done. Not just to say, well, I did this because you didn't do it. I'm determined to obtain definitive proof of the existence of Sasquatch, whether it be the Pacific Northwest Sasquatch or BC or Port Chatham hairy man. And to actually go and do that, it was a great accomplishment. But I wanted to go into an area that hadn't been tainted with any of, fake news or false stories, something like that. To actually go into an area that was kind of virgin territory in the business of tracking Bigfoot and research. And to me, that was phenomenal to be able to do that, to be a first to go in there and really see what we're dealing with.
Good stuff, and you achieved that. Well done. So I want to just talk to Beans now, if I may. Beans, I want to talk to you about the history a little bit.
Yeah, Port Chatham has a really interesting history. It started out in the early 1900s. It was, a cannery moved in. It's ideally located near Kachemak Bay in the Gulf of Alaska, and they had moved in and were using the harbor there to bring in the fish that they were catching, commercially out in the waters. And the town, sprung up around the cannery, and a lot of the workers there were Aleut natives who are indigenous to the area. And for a few years, things seemed to go pretty good, and then they started. People started coming up missing. There were reports of hunters that were murdered, and things started to kind of go bad. And the natives attributed it to their version of Bigfoot. They call it the Nantinaq, and they were scared. And in fact, I think it was around 1915 or 1905. The natives packed up and left the cannery. They threatened to leave unless the company that owned the cannery hired some guards to protect them from the Nantinaq to bring in armed guards. So it actually drove the natives out of town and forced the cannery to hire armed guards. And then a few years later, eventually everybody just packed up and left. And through some of the elder stories and some of the old timers that were around then, you can hear a lot of interesting things from them about how people were scared and how all these mysterious deaths were being attributed to the hairy man or the Nantinaq.
Now, you're in law enforcement, and you're also a local. You live in Homer, which is the nearest town to Port Chatham, and we've mentioned it's only accessible by boat. When you hear these stories, some people may say, well, it sounds like something out of a Stephen King novel. I mean, I certainly did when Stephen first mentioned it to me when we were in Vancouver Island, and I started to research it. But I was intrigued, but I was also skeptical. Putting your head on, your legal head, what do you think about the veracity of this story? It sounds incredible, but you've not been able to find anything to refute it. That's my understanding. Is that correct, Speaks?
Right, Adam. And I've dug into it. I've done some research, especially what interests me, from a law enforcement standpoint, are these dead people. I mean, it's a big deal when somebody dies. So usually these things are documented through medical examiner records or death certificates or something. And so I've done quite a bit of digging, office, armchair research, online research, and I've actually talked with some people at the State Archives in Juneau, and I had them look up some stuff for me. I haven't found any death certificates from anyone that died there, but I did confirm the identity of Andrew Kamluck, who he's one of the natives in the village that was reportedly killed by the hairy man when it threw like a large piece of equipment at him. And that was exciting for me to actually verify that this person lived and he was a real person. So that was pretty exciting. But I have to say, my contact at the State Archives and I were both pretty perplexed that we couldn't find a death certificate for Andrew. Of course, all this, the town was abandoned in 1950, so all that was before Alaska became a state. So my theory is they just, because it wasn't mandated by anyone, they just didn't keep that good of a record at the time.
Yeah, but I think it's very interesting that you have actually found some corroboration to the very real views of the people then. One of the things I just wanted to touch on, obviously you're a local, one of the things that Steve and I found, and I found as well, that there was a lot of superstition amongst the people in the area, even now, about Port Chatham. What do you feel about that from your own personal experience, Beans?
Well, I mean, that's absolutely true. A lot of the natives, they feel, to speak about the Nantinaq or to mention the Nantinaq, basically you're calling it out. You're inviting it to come visit you. So it's pretty taboo to talk about such things.
And do you consider the story, from the research you've done, based on what you know so far, do you feel that the story of Port Chatham has substance, that it is tangible or not?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that it's tangible. I mean, even for this much time to have passed, there's still people. There are people still alive that were born in Port Chatham, and they can tell the stories about how scared people were back then. So, you have actual living witnesses, people that experienced it that can relate what happened.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really struck me, and I mentioned it when we were there, is you and I were looking at the buildings, and you noticed the piping, the hot water piping that was there. And, you made a point to me, they spent a lot of time here. They invested. This wasn't a couple of wooden shacks and that was it. This was a proper thriving little town. They had plumbing. Yeah, they had all of the complex things that's a society. They had a post office. And yet this is one of the few times where civilization has actually rolled back because of a creature. What do you say to that, Beans? Is that fair or not?
Yeah, I love that point. It's actually one of my favorite things about the legend of Port Chatham, is the point that you made about how this is a rare occurrence of humans, of technology being driven out. The place, usually once humans move in somewhere, they take it over and they build buildings and they bring in civilization. And in this case, the opposite happened. The humans left it to go back to nature. And that's something you really don't see that often. Yeah,
and even today, I mean, it's my understanding that some of your colleagues were fearful that you might never return. Is that fair enough to say?
Yeah, it's pretty funny actually. When I told some of my coworkers what I was doing and where I was going with Stephen and you, and my boss kind of joked and told my coworkers that they better say bye because they would probably never see me again.
And that's you. That's very real. I mean, I remember when Stephen and I went the first time, and we couldn't find anybody to take us at first. Is that fair enough, Stephen? There was only one guy who would take us. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, really difficult. I was like, I couldn't. I mean, to get out there, and I remember how many people I had talked to before we even got there that were just like, we want to go there. You don't want to go there, and And then when people got word that we were going there, I especially some of the local inhabitants, the natives that are out there that were the descendants of people of Port Chatham, started telling me, you don't want to go out there. That's a very evil place. Please don't go out there. You don't want to go out there. But yeah, it was very difficult. It has a really, really bad aura among the locals up there.
It's actually pretty frustrating.
Go on. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, like you said, I live in Homer, and I can see, I have a view of the bay from my house, and as the crow flies, Port Chatham's only 40 miles away from where I'm sitting right now. But for me to get there, like Stephen was explaining earlier, it's quite the undertaking and pretty expensive. It's pretty frustrating to be so close yet so far, because I would like to go back.
No, we'll come on to that later. What I'd say to you, Beans, is the first time we got the boat there was somebody on the boat, a friend of the captain's, and he said, I've wanted to go here all my life, and this is my chance. Because it was a fortune to get there and back. It was a fortune, like $1,000 to get there and to go one way, and it's a lot of money to pay. Good. Okay, I want to introduce Josiah now, who's obviously been patiently waiting. Hello, Josiah. How are you?
Hey, very good. Enjoying being part of this.
Now, the first thing I have to say is congratulations on your wedding. Ladies and gentlemen, Josiah's just got married to a lovely young lady. I was looking at his wedding photographs. How was your honeymoon?
Oh, my gosh. We honeymooned into Fiji, and it was so great. We enjoyed it thoroughly, but it's good to be back in Alaska where we call home. Good
stuff. Now, when you obviously did filming, and this was a unique place. You had no battery backup. There was a load of superstition about it. How did you handle the filming? Was there any particular difficulties you want to impart to people?
Well, I mean, just because of the remoteness of the location and having to travel by boat, I wasn't able to bring all of my gear. I have a lot of lighting equipment and a lot of stabilization gear to keep the footage smooth. But really, I stripped my bag down to just bring the fundamentals and have my camera and just one basic light in case I needed to light the boat up. But I didn't bring anything off the boat onto the ground because we were going to be hiking miles and miles through the woods, and I didn't want to carry a 50-pound backpack full of stuff. And that wasn't really the purpose of the filming. I wasn't trying to create a story and bring lighting equipment and have them stand under the light just perfectly. I was documenting real life. So I was just following them around with the camera and asking them questions to, fuel the story. But I wasn't trying to create anything and say, oh, re-say that, and say this for me. So it was very documentary style instead of TV show style.
When you obviously used the drone, I mean, was it difficult to film with the drone, or is it something that you are very competent with?
So I'm going on 3 years now of being an FAA certified drone pilot, and so I'm very confident in my drone skills. The first time we went out there, it was a bluebird day, just absolutely lovely, but we didn't have any batteries with us, so I just had 2 batteries for the drone. And so I would put the drone up, go quickly grab some cinematic sequences, and then bring it down to conserve battery for the whole trip, because total I had about an hour of flight time, and by the end of the trip I had used it all up. Now, the second 2 times we were on a boat that did have power, so I was able to charge my battery, so I was willing to fly more often. However, it rained constantly those next 2 trips, and so there was a half-hour break where it didn't rain, where I put the drone up into the air to go scout out and get some shots of the area for the film. And then before I even brought the drone back to the boat, it was raining, and I was hurrying to get the drone back on board because, as you know, electronics and rain don't fare well together. So it was hard to fly the drone, even though I'm very good at it just because of the weather.
So the last trip, the last investigation we were on, it was absolutely horrendous. I mean, I was experiencing a new phenomenon, which was when it was actually started to rain inside my ear, it seemed, with the driving rain. How was that for filming, Josiah?
Well, trying to capture a story and document everything that happened did prove challenging because the rain was driving sideways. So my lens would quickly fill up with water, and I would try and wipe it dry with my lens cleaner, but then my lens cleaner was soaking wet too, and so I was using a wet rag to try and get water off, which didn't help very much. So it was challenging, and also trying to get good audio when the wind is howling sideways is also hard. So it was a fun challenge. It was fun, but it was hard.
It was hard. Now, gentlemen, I want to ask you some questions amongst all of you. Those are specific questions I had for you. So feel free to answer, whoever wants to go first. One of the things that I was interested in was there was a lot of superstition even today around going to Port Chatham. And obviously, Stephen had arranged permission with the Native American tribes there to go there. So we had that permission. But am I right in thinking even today the tribes are very, very nervous about going there themselves? Is that correct?
Absolutely, Adam, 100%. And I will tell you what, this last trip that we did, prior to leaving, I had received more emails, phone calls, instant messages from members of the native members of the villages up there, specifically Nanwalek and Port Graham. And, those people that settled there, they're the direct ancestors of the people that had fled Port Chatham. That's where they went and they relocated to. And, due to the amount of press that we were getting from this, they became aware of it. And then with the release of the film, and they were very, 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 very nervous about that area. It still holds it is still a very, very dark place to them. Many of them said it's very evil. And, if you're going to, you don't want to, it's a place you don't want to go to. It's very dark. There's more out there than just the Nantinaq and things like that. So it's a place that even to this day, they don't want to go there. It holds that much terror in their hearts because of what the things that occurred there, when their parents were living there and things like that.
Yeah, and I got a semblance of that. Even when we were going on the last trip, it seemed to me that the nearest little village on the way there, which we were travelling by Port Graham, when we landed there and asked to speak to people, they were polite, but they seemed very reluctant. Is that a fair comment?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I got to speak at length with a number of these people that had got either sent me an email or instant message or whatever, and it intrigued me, and I said, could I speak with you? And so I got their phone numbers and gave them a call, and we had extended conversations, and they gave me a rundown of the history of it. But the place it still strikes terror in their heart because the legends of Port Chatham are true. The Nantinaq and the terror he inflicted and the reason that they left. And one of the things that you hit on it a little bit ago was not only the stories of the Nantinaq, but there's also a strong belief of supernatural, the Dark Woman. The legend of the Dark Woman, you don't hear much about that. You hear about the Nantinaq and the terror he inflicted and murdering people and all that kind of things. But at the same time, the area has a history of what you would call a haunting. You have what they call the Dark Woman, and she was a witch or an apparition or an evil spirit that haunts the area and terrorizes people as well. So there's not only the Nantinaq element of it, the hairy man, frightening, terrible predator, killing people and cannibal and things like that. You have the spirits of Port Chatham, and I heard more warnings from these people about the evilness of the place this time than I heard from anybody else. There was more of an emphasis on that is an evil area, and there's evil spirits there and demons, and it's haunted, and you just need to stay away from there. Just stay away.
So, Stephen, when you were wandering around on these 3 occasions you've been, did you get any semblance of that? Was there any sort of feeling that you felt there was something evil or oppressive, for want of a better word?
Absolutely. 100%. And not in the first trip, and not in the second trip, but this third trip, definitely so. I saw things, and I felt things that cannot be explained. And I felt I felt an evil presence while we were there. And, I was speaking with some of the other team about that, since I've gotten back after this last trip, because the thing that was significant about this last trip was this: we spent more time in the old town site of Port Chatham than we had ever spent on any of the previous trips. I mean, that's where the focus of our time was. We were in that town. And there's always, every trip that we've gone, when you walk through the old town site of Port Chatham and you see the buildings and the old remnants of it, it has a uneasy feeling about it. It has a dark presence, and you can feel it when you're there. I don't feel it when you're out of there, but just on the town site itself. There's something very ominous about it and something very dark, and I've always felt that. But this last trip, we were there that's where we concentrated our time. And when we were doing some filming there, especially when we were hanging out in that little shack, I saw things that didn't make any sense. And
What did you see, Steve?
Well, I've tried to describe it to people before. And for an example, and I don't know if some of our listeners or you are, I'm older than most of you, but if you've ever seen the movie The Evil Dead, and in the beginning of the movie, basically, there's this presence, this evil presence, this spirit that's moving through the trees. It's moving, and you can see the movement of the trees as if somebody was coming towards you, if somebody's running through the trees, but you don't see a physical body. And when we were on the last day, when we were doing the filming, and we were there for hours and hours and hours, we were hanging there. I was uncomfortable. The longer we were there, the more uncomfortable I was that we were being there. And then I was standing out back, looking out the back of that shack, and I'm sitting there and I'm just looking up into the woods there, and you've got all those saplings that are 10 to 12 feet high that runs back into the woods there, and all of a sudden I'm looking and I see movement, I see trees moving as if something is coming towards me through the trees, and it's not the wind, because it's just like somebody that's moving through the trees, and it's coming towards me. And it's coming, and it gets to that last tree, and that tree shakes, and all of a sudden I feel like this gust of something just kind of this wind of something that just kind of bounced off me and then run around, and then it would circle around again, and then it would kind of like circle around, and it kept coming around back there. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
Are you going back, Stephen?
I'm after this last trip, I don't really think that I want to go back.
Yeah, I don't think Daisy, your wife's, going to let you go back after telling that story, is she?
Well, she's listening right now, and I haven't told her much about the things that I saw. But combined with that, if you've ever seen the movie The Evil Dead, you'll understand what I'm talking about.
I've seen the movie The Evil Dead. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But then there was
I just wanted you to articulate it in your own words, because I'm interested. I'm interested in your viewpoint of it.
Yeah, there was definitely a presence there. That's
Okay,
all that I could say, and I felt that presence.
Good. Beans, are you going back to Port Chatham? You said you might do it, so why? Why?
I think so. Eventually, I think I'm going to make it back there. Probably not anytime soon, but maybe not next year, but the next year after. I think I might see about going back and spending a couple of days there, just to check it out, just to do some more investigation. I got a creepy vibe while we were in the town site, like Steven said, but I never felt like an evil presence or anything like that, like some of the other team members did. I've been in abandoned buildings before. I've been in supposedly haunted places before, and I've never felt what I would call a presence. So I guess I'm gonna keep searching.
No, fair enough. What is it that makes you want to go back? I mean, I'm not saying that I wouldn't go back ever. I might do in the future. I understand why Stephen doesn't want to go back, especially as he's plowed so much money into it in the past, and he's achieved a lot of his ambition there. But what is it that would make you want to go back, do you think? Why?
I'm kind of enamored with the place. Ever since I went there on the first trip with Stephen, I think it's beautiful. It's really it's one of the wildest places I think I've ever been, where nature is just, in its full glory. There's nothing there that's keeping it back. It's just a truly untamed place, and I think it's probably one of the best places here in Alaska where somebody might actually find themselves face to face with a Bigfoot.
Okay, good stuff. Josiah, would you go back?
Well, it's all about opportunity. Like you said, it's incredibly difficult to get out there, and I don't have an extra $3,000 in my back pocket just to go for funsies. But if the opportunity presented itself, I'd absolutely go back. It's really, I'm an Alaska boy, and I love adventure, and I love hiking, and so I get to do all of that in Port Chatham. And also, like Bean said, it's just beautiful, and there's mountains everywhere. There's waterfalls. There's gorgeous big tall trees because it rains heavily there, and I would definitely go back.
And gentlemen, I think you are blessed to live in a truly beautiful place. I did love it in Alaska. I thought it was gorgeous. I'm definitely going to go back one way or another, whether it's to Port Chatham or somewhere else. I'm definitely going back to Alaska. I loved it. It's magnificent. It's a true frontier place, and places like that are so rare. And that drive between, the you being something on that drive between Homer and Anchorage is just gorgeous. A really beautiful place. So, Josiah, what's next for you? What are you going to do next? What's in the future?
Yeah, well, I am staying incredibly busy with a lot of commercial work here. I've been filming videos for the hospitals and the schools in the area, and I also stay really busy on my YouTube channel. Like I said, I love exploring and hiking in Alaska, and I'm always trying to find interesting places to explore, and so I document my trips on YouTube. It's called The Alaskan Outsider, and I go around and just bring my drone and my camera gear, and I love telling stories, and so that's what I do here in Alaska.
Good stuff. And how about you, Beans?
Oh, I work full time for the city here, and then on my rare occasions where I get some time off, I like to spend a lot of time in the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge and investigate sightings and stuff that happen there. There's been a few Bigfoot sightings in that area, so I try and spend as much time out there as I can and keep my eyes peeled. And I'm working in the early stages of working on a book about Port Chatham, and actually going to get some of these stories and legends documented and down on paper.
Good. I look forward to that. I'll certainly be buying it. And Stephen, how about you? You've got a conference to promote. Do you want to tell people about what you're doing next?
Well, yeah, I thought I was going to come back from Port Chatham. I was going to take a vacation, but no, I can't, because here's what we got going on. We've got a lot of exciting stuff going on this summer. We have the second annual 2019 Spokane Valley Sasquatch Roundup, which is a one-day Bigfoot conference we have going on here in Spokane Valley. That is Saturday, August 31st, which we're really excited about doing it this year. Not only do we have some fabulous speakers and some presenters there, but we also will be showing some of our film from the last expedition. It also we'll be showing some of the evidence that we collected over the last 3 expeditions while we're up there, because we haven't really done that much. So we're going to be doing that. And then after the roundup, we're going to be going off on a 3-day camp out investigation up in Stevens County, Washington, which is just north of Spokane, about 70 miles up there in the wilderness up there. We're going to be hooking up with the Stevens County Bigfoot Research Group up there and doing some investigation up there. It's had a lot of activity. I just got back from last week up there. Surprising how much Bigfoot activity we have up there, and didn't hear much about it before, but now the people that know that we're actively doing things, we're going to be heading up there. And then the last
thing. You're going to be busy.
Oh yeah, we got a lot going on. And also, I wanted to just mention the film. We In our September trip to Port Chatham, the September expedition there, September 2018, we actually made a film. Josiah did a fabulous job on it. It's called In Search of the Port Chatham Hairy Man, and it's available on Vimeo, and it's also available on Amazon, and we also have that available on DVD. If you're curious about Port Chatham, Alaska, and would like to see what the place looks like and what we did while we were up there, you're welcome to it. It's a great film. Hope you enjoy it.
Good stuff. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I'll see you very shortly. Thanks ever so much for joining us. And good evening. Mike's going to ask me a few questions, but thank you ever so much, the three of you, for being on the show tonight. We really appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, Adam.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank
All
you.
right. Talk to you later, guys. Yep. Bye.
Bye, Josiah. Okay, Mike. So that was Stephen, Larry, Beans, Baxter, and Josiah. What did you think? Any views?
Oh, I'm floored. First, what a great group of guys, and what a great interview that was. I really appreciate those guys joining us. Fascinating story of Port Chatham. Adam, I cherish this opportunity to turn the microphone around on you, so to speak, for a moment. But before we get started with a couple of questions I have for you, I want to go ahead and preface this a little bit. You, in case some of our newer listeners might not be familiar with your background, you were quite well traveled as in your interest of cryptozoology. You've been around. You've been to Sumatra and the Congo, Mongolia, Nepal, places like that. So
unexplored places sometimes, Mike, as well. Not just traveled, unexplored. Some of them.
Unexplored, yes, and in search of living dinosaurs and orang pendek, no less, and things like that. So, you, to say the least, you're no Bubba Foot Johnson that just happens to have a Bigfoot page on Facebook or anything like that. So, I'm in a fortunate position to be able to ask you about this very compelling mystery, one that certainly deserves much attention. Adam, how much credence does it add to you that not once but twice the village was basically abandoned completely for the same reason, no less?
Yeah, I think, from my own point of view, because I've done all this stuff in different parts of the world, I'll give you a long answer, like going to unexplored places in the Congo, Mongolia, climbing mountains in Nepal, whatever. What really interests me is to do something unique that people haven't done before. And I was really sat in a bar talking to Stephen on Vancouver Island when he first mentioned the story to me. And because it seemed like a first and it seemed like such a fascinating story, I was really compelled to do it. And then, of course, before I go and do something that was potentially very dangerous, I mean, certainly the first time we went, no one had done it. And now you're seeing more boats sort of veering on the edge of the area, but we didn't see anybody the first time I went, and it was unique. So it has to be, to get me really interested in something now. I like to be the first. I like to be something that nobody's ever done before or unusual. So the story's so interesting, and you heard with Beans there, somebody who's in law enforcement who's exploring the story. It's a fascinating story, and so far it's holding water. That these people literally abandoned this town because of a hairy man. And there are people alive today who will tell that story. And I find that remarkable. Remarkable.
It is indeed remarkable. And for it to have happened in 1905 and also during the height of World War II leading up to around 1950, that's very telling and compelling, as you say. Well, Adam, let me ask you now. This village in the 40s, it was by all rights a small town, but a thriving little cannery village. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was doing okay. I mean, as I said, during the interview, one of the things that we did notice is that it wasn't just a couple of wooden shacks. They had a post office, they had plumbing, they had all the general amenities, little store. It wasn't nothing. It was a sizable little town for that part of Alaska at the time. Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons the area became a cannery and of note to many to start with was because of the very strong salmon run in the area. Is there, I presume, some financial gain there in the purpose of putting the cannery there in the first place? So there was something of value there that brought the Europeans and the Russian Alouettes to the area initially. That very same. Go ahead.
No, go on, carry on. What were you saying? Go on.
I was going to say that very same salmon run, that would also be of great benefit to a potential Sasquatch population in the area, would it not?
Yeah, I think this is something that's worthy of analysis that I was chewing over in my own mind. Let me explain what I mean. So first of all, one of the other things that interested me was some of the problems I have with Bigfoot researchers is that some of them will quote to me, "Oh, Bigfoot's a wonderful benevolent creature and it's all good, and the reason you're not seeing it is because you're not opening your heart to the notion that it's benevolent." And I just think that's absolute crap. I mean, the notion that there's no species on Earth ever that's been completely good, for want of a better word. You can see it with ourselves. There are people who are nice, people who are not so nice, people who are good, people who are evil. Even with your dog, you look at a dog, you have a bad-tempered dog, and you have a nice dog. You know what I mean? Primates.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know. I've dealt with orangs, gorillas, etc. in the wild. They have personalities and tempers. So the notion that one species is as pure of heart and all of this, it's new age BS. So what interests me with this story is that you have something that's aggressive. Obviously, those same creatures wouldn't be alive today from the 1950s. But at the time, it was something that was very aggressive. And why might it take a risk? Why might it behave in this way, in this sort of environment? And, one of the things I was thinking of is here you have an expanding human population and quintessentially a battle for resources. What you may well have here, and this is all conjecture on my part, of course, but you may have an expanding population, canneries opening, more and more people taking away the fish, which are a food source for these creatures if they're around, and they start to kill them in the battle for resources in the same way as we fought many of our wars over resources. Future wars, they speculated, maybe over resources like water. So it's a resource thing. To fight humans would be very risky, but they must have been desperate or starving if we're going down that path, and that's just speculation. But that's what I imagined caused the killings if they are proven.
Well, and that's a very, very good point. You had an area, by all rights, that's absolutely perfect Sasquatch country with a thriving, potentially, population of Sasquatch in the area. So if you have this tremendous, valuable food source that you rely on and your family relies on and the other Sasquatch rely on, and you've seen enough of the white man's intrusions, and now he's taking your fish. I guess what I'm getting at some point, did we reach a breaking point where, the Sasquatch just kind of put his foot down and says, you know what, I'm not going to be a kind little cuddly teddy bear type like you hear about in the comic books. I'm going to go down here and shred somebody and mutilate him brutally.
Yeah, I think any animal, if it becomes desperate, will behave in an aggressive manner. You see that with bears, for example, polar bears, grizzly bears. Often the most aggressive ones are the young ones or the old ones who haven't got enough meat on them for hibernation. I think that's what happened to that guy Timothy. I can't remember his surname, but the guy who was mauled and eaten by a grizzly bear. I think he was a bad grizz.
Yeah.
He hadn't put on enough meat for hibernating in winter, and he was out there trying to bear whisper or whatever he was doing, and the damn thing ate him, and his girlfriend too. So, but it's like anything. Imagine how people would behave in a town if there was no food run within a week. People always used to say
exactly.
Your domestic dog's only 48 hours away from being a wolf, and obviously it's not literally a wolf, but if you're desperate for resource, you know, and people are taking it, you'll kill them. And I think that if there's a reason for it, then that was it. Obviously, Stephen touched on the spiritual vibe and the spiritual element. And, you know, what I'd say about that from my own personal point of view is this. When the first time we went, Stephen, Josiah and I, we camped on this sort of spit, which is away from the town, and we went into the town. And I never felt any vibe in any way. I wasn't with them in September. I couldn't go because of work commitments. I just wasn't able to. But obviously I went on this last place, this last investigation. And, you know, near the town, there was no problem. We camped in this other, we investigated in these other areas, set up trail cameras, did all of that. Never felt any sort of vibe anywhere, except in that little area where Port Chatham is. And for want of a better word, it felt oppressive. Yeah. Now, you know, if you were going to be skeptical about it, we could say, well, that's just because of the stories, and you're projecting something emotion onto the place. But I could see how people could think that, but I don't think so. It definitely felt unpleasant, and it's not like you wander around some creepy haunted house something, so you already have that projection. There isn't much of Port Chatham left. There's a couple of buildings, there's some machinery, and that's pretty much it. It's not some big old town you wander around, but there's something about it. It just feels off, for want of a better word. And I didn't think the vibe was a good one. And it's very, but what I'd say is very, very localized. Literally, you can walk 10 minutes away from the place and it's fine. 10 minutes the other way, again, fine. It's just in that area it feels a bit off. There's a lot of bear sign, but that didn't bother me. You know, there's lots and lots of bear tracks everywhere there, and a higher concentration probably in Port Chatham itself than any of the other surrounding areas I trekked in. But it doesn't feel wholesome, and I can understand in a way how the mystery persists. But, you know, a lot of people say, well, I'll go to Port Chatham, and the reason I wanted Stephen to enunciate just how difficult it is, it's not simply, you know, a few people say, oh, well, I'll go, or why didn't you spend longer, etc. It costs so much money to do this gig. It's not, you know, it's not like you can just turn up and it'll be okay. Even the fuel alone for a boat, for practical purposes, just getting there was $400. You know, just for the fuel, aside from the crew, it's not. I mean, you could, in theory, go there and camp for a while and then come back. But again, even that would be thousands. Most people could not afford to do this on their own whack. They might be able to hire a boat to drive past the Port Chatham and jump in and have a quick look round for half an hour and go. And there's been a couple of people who have done that. But practically spending days there is very, very expensive, and it takes a lot of resource to do that, and it's not easy. I mean, when we were there the last time as well, it was torrential driving rain all the time, and every time we got into that Zodiac, it was driven. Every time we got in, as we were about to go on the shore, it just got worse. I mean, there was one occasion when the Zodiac nearly flipped. And I don't think Beans will mind me saying this, but he himself says he's not a strong swimmer, and I was a bit worried that we might actually tip over. On one occasion, I thought it was 50-50 when it went up on a white peak, and I thought if it goes one way, we're in a lot of trouble here. So it's hard. It's hard work if the weather's bad. It's dangerous, very dangerous, and very expensive. Not an easy gig, you know, and you know, to do that gig, you have to suffer. It's simply not like going in your local woods in Ohio or the Pacific Northwest. It's not like that. And I say that as somebody who has done very hardcore expeditions in very remote parts of the world. I've done some very dangerous stuff. This isn't the most dangerous thing I've done, but it's certainly not the easiest. It is very hard work, and you do suffer to do it.
Yes, and of course, the profitability of the salmon was the original draw. Do you think that people in general will return to the immediate area in the near future?
Yeah, I do. I think that was one of the things I was thinking about. So the first time I went there with Josiah and Stephen on the first occasion, it really it was, I mean, as he said, because we were talking about it from a logistics point of view, he only could get one guy to go. You know, there was one boat that would take us, this little metal boat that would take us there, and it was a pain in the backside, frankly. And he'd only drop us off and pick us up. But, you know, even in a year, I saw more boats in the general vicinity, as it's become more talked about. I did see more boats in the area and moving around a bit. So I think human encroachment is starting again. Really, we're on the edge of it. And, you know, one of the things I contrasted it was in my own mind is when I first went to Sumatra over 20 years ago now. I went to Gunung Tujuh, a lake there, to look for the orang pendek, and nobody went there. You know, a few people, maybe occasionally. I mean, it's certainly not on the far side of the lake. You know, as I went in, there were gibbons howling as I went in. But now, you know, the sons of my guides, which are, you know, can practically Facebook Live from the edge of the volcano. Yeah. You know, and if you told me that 20 years ago, I'd have laughed and said it's just not possible. But Port Chatham probably will become, within a few years, I would imagine, one of those places which people go to. If you've got the money, you can get there. You know, even if it's a day trip, you can get the money to go there and you know, say you wanted to hire a boat, I would imagine you could all chip in, hire a boat, have a quick look around and go. It wouldn't be like a detailed investigation like we did, but it's certainly possible to get there. So I would imagine more and more people will go, and it's a nice bay, and maybe humans will come back to that place, and whatever's there will either attack them again, or maybe it will move on into the interior and give it up. But it is a remarkable story. I mean, the reason that I went and did it was because it's so unique, and for no other reason than that. I was fascinated by it. So yes, I think that eventually my clear view was, you know, if we were talking about this in 10 years' time, I wouldn't be surprised if settlements start to pepper the area. There's certainly more boat traffic this year than there was last year, considerably more. Not actually on land, but certainly in the general vicinity, people driving boats around the area a little bit more than they were. You know, when we first went, we were such a unique sight. The sea otters would literally stop and stare at us, and, you know, and chatter, because I don't think they'd seen people before. But now I would imagine that isn't the case.
Well, I certainly hope any potential future tragedies could be avoided, and we won't know for many years. But certainly, humans will continue to encroach, and there will continue to be confrontations over resources. Well, Adam, I can't say enough about how fascinating this whole program has been, and what a compelling and fascinating story, the mystery of Port Chatham. I was going to let you take it back and say goodnight, but before we go, I wanted to ask you about, did you have anything upcoming in the next few weeks you wanted to mention?
No, I've got a couple of things on the boil, but I'll keep them under wraps for now. Not you know, a couple of things as ever, and as soon as I can reveal them, of course I will, and I'll reveal it first here.
All right. Well, you know, I certainly hope to be in the field with you, possibly this coming fall. That's something I've been looking forward to for quite a while. I look forward to speaking to you in greater detail about that soon. And I just wanted to thank you and thank our fine guest again for contributing to such an outstanding broadcast.
Thank you ever so much. Thank you, Mike. I'll speak to you soon, and we'll, of course, let you know, everyone, as soon as we have a new show. That was me talking to Mike. But first of all, special thanks to our guests, Stephen Major, Larry Beans Baxter, and Josiah Dean Martin. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you very soon, or you'll certainly hear from us very soon with another show. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good night from Mike and Hans.